Morning, everybody.
Good morning, all. 1, 2, 3.
Morning.
I see a quorum.
Hey, Tom, just a heads up, we're just working on some tech issues of getting Chris connected to the audio in the conference room.
Okay. I don't, maybe folks can pull up their copy of the minutes and we'll get ready to take a look at those.
All right, can you hear us from State Street?
Yes,
All right, thank you. Problem with the audio in the conference room, but we're here by phone now. We, as in me.
all right. Hang on. Well, I'll call the meeting of the Apportionment Board to order at 9:03 a.m. on Monday, October 25, and declare that a quorum is present. I think we have all of the members except Jeremy Hansen, who's given us a heads up that he's unable to attend this morning. The first item of business is the review and approval of the minutes of the board's October 15 meeting, which were distributed, and some suggested edits were sent around by myself. Covering the October 15 meeting where we took a vote on the tentative house plan. Are there any additions, corrections, or other comments on the October 15 minutes?
Yeah, Tom, I missed your corrections to them, but the one that I had was, it has me saying that Stowe could elect 4 members to the House. I think I said that Stowe could elect 3. 4 is misspelled. So I'm not sure if that was the intent, but I think it should say that I said it.
Okay, well, those actually are, that includes my changes, and I thought you said 4.
No, it's 3. It was, they can
Okay.
elect 1 from the single member district and 2 from the 2-member district. So it's 3.
Okay, we'll make that correction. Any other comments on the minutes? Hearing and seeing none. Who's got the energy to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Okay. Rob moves to adopt the corrected minutes of the October 15 meeting of the board. Is there a second?
Mary raised her hand.
Mary, thank you, Mary. All those in favor of adopting the motion, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, do likewise. Abstentions. The motion carries. That then I think it's possible that the agenda for today's meeting that I posted thinks it's actually the October 18 meeting. So let's make sure that everyone agrees today is October 25, and we'll get off on a better start. We have set aside for the next agenda item is public comment, and I know Mr. Bristow Johnson sent in a detailed set of comments this morning by email to the board email addresses. So we acknowledge receipt of that about the Burlington portion of the board's tentative house plan. So thank you, Mr. Bristow Johnson, for that. Is there any, Mr. Hughes, would you like to be heard in public comment? Hearing going to take that as a no. Mr. Bristow Johnson, would you like to say a few words in addition to what you filed? Because we have that in hand and you don't need to go through all of that.
I understand. I won't go through all of that. I just want to say on the Senate map, it would seem to me to be elegant if you guys choose to, or a few people, I'm sorry, a few people choose to have 2 senator districts. I think it would be quite elegant if the city of Burlington was a single Senate district with 2 senators. It just seems, appropriate when the population of the city of Burlington is almost exactly 1/15 of the population of the state of Vermont.
For whatever it may be worth, there are those who in the past historically would raise the point that under our overall scheme of representative governance in Vermont, that senators are supposed to be looking at broader collections of interests, sort of distinguishing them from, well, in the real old days, every House member represented just the interests of one town. That's been gone now for 56 years. But there is still a view that senators should encompass a wider range of concerns and issues. I don't think when those views were articulated, there was much thought given to the possibility of a single town or city having the population to support a single or even or much less a 2-member district. So it's maybe sort of a case of first impression at this point, but thank you for sharing that. Seeing no other public comments coming in, the next item on the agenda would be, I guess, review of the.
Hey, Tom,
Yes.
there is another member of the public, Ed Cafferty. I'm not sure if Ed wants to
Oh,
speak.
I didn't see that. Thank you. Mr. Cafferty, would you like to be heard? If so, please unmute yourself and good morning. Mr. Cafferty, if you would like to address us during public comment, please unmute yourself because you are currently muted. Well, perhaps Mr. Cafferty stepped away. We'll see about that.
Can you hear me now?
I can. You were no longer muted.
Good. I pressed a number of buttons, but clearly wasn't successful. Well, thank you for giving me a moment to speak. I have submitted to you a proposal in terms of Chittenden County with regards to state Senate districts. And my basic concerns are with regards to the state Senate, how it would be designed for Chittenden County. I also want to just make it clear that I'm speaking for myself and not organizations which I belong to. I favor 1 and 2 senators per district. I also strongly feel that Charlotte and Huntington should be part of Chittenden County in terms of determining state Senate areas. I think that that was a result of the population shifts, that it is clear to me that Chittenden County should see an increase of one state senator. And also, it would also result in an increase of 3 House district seats as well. I'm willing to talk in detail about my proposal today or at a later meeting, but I want to thank you for giving me time to speak.
You're welcome. Have you taken a look at how you would recommend the board address the situation in the Addison Senate District with 2 senators that are dependent upon some number of people outside of Addison County?
Well, I have not. Addison County abuts a number of other places as well, other than Chittenden County. My conversations with the people in Huntington, they are very much want to be aligned with the Mount Mansfield School District. And Charlotte was also put on I understand, originally put on for spinning off to Addison 10 years ago. And there was a complete uproar here. I live in Charlotte, and there's just no way they're going to agree to being aligned or be part of Addison. So there'll be significant political pushback with regards to that.
It was the folks from Charlotte 10 years ago who suggested that instead Huntington go into Addison County. So that didn't always bring out the best in the collegiality in everyone.
I understand, but I'm just saying we're talking about today. And as far as my particular viewpoint is, I would like to be able to keep Huntington in Chittenden County in terms of a eastern district that is, certainly more aligned with the Mount Mansfield Schools, district.
Well, keep thinking about the Addison situation. We haven't found any way of pulling population from Rutland County to make it work because of the population deviation issues there. On the west side, we've got the lake, and on the east side, some very small towns on the other side of a mountain. So it's when I was in the House many years ago, there was a member from the town of Ludlow who would refer to this situation as a very tight pair of shoes. And that's what we've got there. And it suggests that some people are going to be unhappy with the outcome, but we will let you know when we have an agenda item in a bit to talk about the Senate to see if we can get some momentum back for that now that we're trying to wind down the House proposal. And we will appreciate, we have your suggestions in mind, and we'll continue to look at those. So thank you again.
Thank you for giving me time to speak.
Yep. So that would take us to, here we go. A review and a discussion of the initial responses and questions from boards of civil authority to the tentative House districts map that the board voted on 10 days ago. And perhaps we can go around the virtual table on this. I have had discussions with fairly lengthy discussions with a member of the Brattleboro Board of Civil Authority. They are meeting tonight at a meeting which also includes an agenda item about tax abatements and grievances. But I will be speaking with them at 5:30 p.m. this evening for about 20 minutes, I guess. I heard from a Board of Civil Authority member in the town of Charleston, Vermont, which is adjacent to Brighton / Island Pond. I've heard this morning from a Board of Civil Authority member from Northfield. Yesterday from South Burlington. What was common to them were two things. One, trying to get a better understanding of just what this process is all about and what they should be looking at. And secondly, more specifically, what can they look at that shows the population numbers at a granular level. So if they wanted to propose a different district boundary configuration, how could they do that? And with the assistance of Chris and Mia, I've been able to respond to them, at least on that score, explaining that there is a way to drill down into the map, the tentative map, to that level of detail, to not only enable them to see what the tentative map is proposing, but to also potentially enable them to make suggestions or changes to that to come back to the board. And I thank Jean for also chipping in with the dialogue with the folks in Brattleboro.
Sure.
Has anyone else had any one-on-ones with other town representatives over the last week or so?
Well, the only contact I've had is with my representative, Heidi Sherman, who was asked for a breakdown on how many people were from Stowe were put into the Morrisville district, but that's the only question I've gotten.
Okay.
I've, in addition to talking to the member of the Board of Civil Authority in Brattleboro, as Tom was mentioning, I did have a conversation also with one of the reps from Middlebury, who had a lot of questions about division of Middlebury into 3 pieces, which was definitely a surprise and not a welcome surprise. But mostly we just talked about what the process has been so far and what the upcoming process is in the through the boards of civil authority.
Okay.
When you're ready, I can let you know the kind of calls and emails that Eric and I have been fielding over the last week.
Well, if there's no one else who's on the board who has anything to report in this regard, and if they do, we'll catch up with them in a minute. Why don't you give us that, Chris?
Sure, thank you. As you know, we sent the notice out last Monday around 4:30. And then the next day we did that same day we did a press release, and then I posted on the MuniNet, the UVM listserv that a lot of the municipal officials are on Tuesday. And the calls and emails started coming in. We received several saying, I haven't received the email. I think the MuniNet post and the press release kind of prompted that. So we were glad for that and forwarded on the email to several. There were multiple calls and emails looking for the individual printable maps online, the individual PDFs. And so we would direct people to the place to find those or actually send them if they needed assistance. There were a couple of different contacts asking when the Senate maps are coming and when will the BCAs get to comment on the Senate maps. And so we explained the process there, that the board is working on the Senate maps and that the BCAs would not get to comment on them. Two questions from Norwich and Chester about what happens when a district clerk is no longer residing in that district. So we did a little research on that. For those of you who might not be familiar, the district clerk is the town clerk in the district with the largest population. So these shifting lines will shift some of the district clerks. Like Tom said, we had a few others looking for street population detail. So Brattleboro, Springfield, he mentioned Northfield, Bennington, South Burlington, all looking for those census block kind of numbers so that they, if they move lines, they can understand, you know, what kind of population shifts they're recommending. We had an inquiry about disputed census figures in Marlboro. I think maybe that went out to the LAB members, so you saw that. There's an actual process for disputing the census figures, and we pointed this person in the direction of that. We had an inquiry about whether there was a tool to use to redraw the lines. And so we pointed, that was from Bennington. We pointed the clerk there to the District Builder app in case anyone was interested. And we can actually send a link to a town with the District Builder proposed map already pre-populated there. So then the users just kind of log in and can start to play around with those lines if that's helpful. We've had a couple of inquiries, and we're still looking into this, about conflict of interest for sitting legislators who are on their BCAs. That's a bit of a tricky question to answer, but we're looking into that, and we'll update the board on that soon. A few questions about ballot creation and, you know, what that will mean if the districts shift. And one inquiry from Rutland area about the number of reps they would have before and after, just trying to understand what that would look like in a before and after scenario. That's the basic, those are the subject areas we're getting questions on, with a few specifics there. Eric, is there anything else that you want to add as far as emails that have come your way or phone calls?
I think you covered most of them. The other ones that I've received have just been primarily asking for some image of the map in some other way, kind of like, you know, finding the right temperature of porridge, little Goldilocks parable. And then other people with some questions about, or maybe some misunderstanding about what the process is. So asking questions like, when are these changes final? So just needing to say, here's, you know, as outlined in the memo, here are the next steps for the BCA. Nothing's final yet. Here's how the process will go.
I also, now that I've heard those comments, Chris, I can add that on the census error side, I received, part of the discussion with Brattleboro was, if they have information that's more current than the 2020 US Census, is that something that the apportionment board consider, or is that something that Brattleboro could raise in their commentary or counter proposal for the drawing of their lines? And what was, I'm not sure I got all the details, but they've had some bad flooding in a portion of Brattleboro, and that has caused some apartment buildings to become vacant, I guess on a permanent basis, because of the flood risk. And the question was, can that be taken into account? And I responded that my understanding is that the apportionment board is restricted to looking at the data from the 2020 census. And if you think there's an error in the 2020 census, there's a process for doing that, which is not a quick process. So would not affect the apportionment board's final recommendations to the legislature. But anything that has occurred since likewise, we couldn't consider any local, anecdotal, or other information about change in population. And we may hear that possibly from some others. I don't know. I also have seen some confusion over deviation limitations, and some have looked at the 10% language that appears in some of the materials and have taken that to a conclusion that was not intended by those materials. The 10% is a safe, a sort of safe harbor. So if the overall deviation of a map is 10 or under a US Supreme Court decision, the map is presumptively constitutional. Some have taken that in a bit out of context to mean if the deviation for our district currently is not greater than 10, then there's no need to change our district. And I rewrote some of that language and sent it around to everybody on the board, and that's something that that seemed to help in Brattleboro, where the individual I was talking with said, well, one of our districts is a minus 9.3 or 9.6. That's under 10%, so everything's okay. You don't need to change anything. It took a while to clear that up. We've also been getting a number of emails, and I have been trying to, some of them are just, what is going on? Is this final? How do I, or I think this is a good idea, or I think this proposal over here is a terrible idea. And I've just been responding to those as appropriate, depending upon what the thrust is. I think we will be we will be getting more. I know that I think South Burlington and Brattleboro already had BCA meetings scheduled for the beginning of this week, and I think that's why we heard from them right away. Northfield is meeting on November 2nd. And I think as we get through this week and into next week, the volume is likely of inquiries is likely to increase.
I had a question for Chris, who mentioned the clerk of the board. Clerk of the Board of Civil Authority. If I've understood what you're saying, Chris, the town clerk from the town that's in the district that has the largest population in that district, or the proposed district, is that clerk?
It's an obscure.
Sorry, the district clerk. Sorry, district clerk.
Yeah, okay. It's an obscure public office. What it means is that I believe that the district clerk is the clerk who files the election results for that district, the district being combined of more than one town or parts of more than one town, and somebody has to be the town clerk that does that filing, and that's the district clerk. And the tentative map is if enacted by the legislature would change those around a bit.
The one other thing that they do is collect the candidate petitions for the representatives in that district.
Okay, but they don't have any particular role in the process related to the feedback from the boards of civil authority?
No, the question that we received was from Norwich, which is split in the proposed map. The Norwich clerk lives on one side of the line that would put her outside, I think, the district that she's in now. And the statute is written in such a way as to say, if a town is split and is joined to another town, it's the largest town, or if it's just those two towns, it's the whole town and not the split town has the district clerk. It's a little complicated, but it just means that with more boundary changes, with more district changes, we're probably going to have some shakeup of existing district clerks. And so they're just, some of the clerks are calling in and wondering if they're still the representative district clerk or not.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Let me just see how we're doing. So I think we're holding our own right now in terms of responding quickly and helpfully. And these are somewhat the kinds of questions and concerns we were expecting as people try to engage with a process that their town hasn't had to engage in for 10 years. And as they contemplate, in some cases, joint meetings between and among boards of civil authority that have never had reason to think about having joint meetings. So we will continue to respond, and we are also, once we, and this may be a pivot to my next topic.
I'm sorry, before you go on, I'm sorry. If you were going to go on to Senate redistricting, I wanted to say one more thing about House redistricting.
Okay, because I'm not quite to the Senate yet, but
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, this has to do with an example where on the current tentative plan that we have, I came across like an isolated area, so a non-contiguous portion, which is a tiny little piece, like it might be, I assume it's a census block, because normally in Maptitude, that's the smallest piece you can select. And in this case, it was in one of the Middlebury districts. But I think I can't swear that I haven't seen others, but that's one that I saw, and I just wanted to call attention to the fact that it's there. And the fact that it exists could indicate that there are others too. I just, I certainly haven't done a comprehensive look.
Thank you, Jean. That's very important. If we have, if there are a few pockets in any map that we're working on that don't include some portion of the population, we've got to identify those and fix those. One of the issues that came up in the discussion with Brattleboro is, and if Amarin, if you or someone else from Ledge Council could comment on this, we're not asking for advice, just maybe being able to explain how the legislature approached this. But if you look at the district boundaries for some of the existing House districts that you find in the legislation that was enacted in 2012 to create the existing districts, you will find in some cases what real estate professionals and lawyers would call meets and bounds descriptions, which are in addition to any map that was used, and we'll start with a written description of where the boundary runs. And so some of the conversation with Marlboro was, do you have that version of your tentative map so that we could compare it to the existing meets and bounds description for our 3 districts? And we, of course, the answer was no, we don't have that. I don't recall I don't recall that the Apportionment Board's final report from 2011 included that. My recollection is that that emerged from the legislative process. So Amarin or anyone from Ledge Council, can you shed any light on that?
Good morning. This is Amarin Abergele, Legislative Counsel. As I was not around for the previous reapportionment, I unfortunately don't have any history on how the legislature did that. I don't know, Michael, whether you recall. If you do, please feel free to share.
Yeah, good morning. It's Michael Chernick from Legislative Counsel. If you go back historically, we have used meets and bounds in certain instances to describe districts, going back even to 2002, even to the 1990s. There's never been a set rule, thou shalt use it here or not use it there. It's been a matter of a district by district situation where we found it easier to describe a particular intersection. And that's the way and the reason why there are some meets and bounds elements within particular districts.
And well, we maybe at another time we can ask, how did you do it? I mean, did you go out and walk around with a survey transit? I'm being facetious, but some of the descriptions are very detailed about which side of the street you're going down and brooks and rivers and things like that.
We looked at, Mr. Chair, Michael Chernick again from Legislative Counsel. We did look at different maps. We did not literally go out with survey equipment. I can attest to that. But short of that, we would look at different maps, topographical maps, different points when we were looking at blocks in terms of streets. I'm actually thinking about South Burlington, and I can remember more in 2002 than in 2012. We literally had to look at streets in terms of which was on which side of the street in terms of a block line and trying to even out the numbers appropriately. So we would look at a variety of different maps. Maptitude has some. We would go to other geographic maps if necessary to try to find geographic elements that would clarify where districts begin and end. And that became especially important where we had streets that were partially in District A and partially in District B. There certainly have been instances of that.
Thank you. That's good to know. I think the advantage of that, if nothing else, is if we have both, at the end of the day, when the legislature completes its work, if we have both the set of maps and some written descriptions of boundary lines, there's a check and balance there to make sure that it's right. And for some people, the written version of it will be more accessible and easier to follow, both of which are good things. This could go in two different places of the agenda, but I guess I'll get into it now. I think it was last night I sent around to the board members an excerpt from the 2011 Apportionment Board final House report, which I think I picked it from, I did pick two different towns in their districts to illustrate how much the kind of detail in writing that we put into the final report to cover a written description of the district without meets and bounds. In each case, we did a short historical synopsis of where what this district looked like in prior iterations of reapportionment, not in great detail, but to give a sense of whether the district had been relatively stable or whether it had not been relatively stable every 10 years. There's a piece about substantial equality of voting by discussing the negative or positive population deviation, a mention of the compactness using, at that point, a ROIC score and a Polsby-Popper rating. And then we addressed the adherence to county boundaries and other existing political subdivisions. For example, in the first one I picked, which was Addison 1, we said these 4 towns and 1 city are in northwestern Addison County. All members of the Addison Regional Planning Commission and the Addison County Solid Waste Management District. All are members of the Virgins Union High School District and are located within the same environmental district for Act 250 and other state permit purposes. The next piece was patterns of geography, social interaction, trade, political ties, and common interests. These 5 towns have been configured together in a 2-member district, sometimes with another town added in since 1965. Route 22A connects Addison, Panton, and Virgins running north and south. Otter Creek forms the boundary between Panton and Waltham, and it runs through Virgins and Ferrisburg. Virgins, Middlebury, and the Burlington area are the principal commercial centers that serve this area. And that's a very, very short effort to maybe touch the bases or some of the bases of that statutory charge to the Apportionment Board. And the one for South Burlington does something similar to that. As I indicated in my email, that's a lot of work. Typically, if the final map that we are proposing is more, or it looks more like the existing map, then to that extent, the work for this portion of the final report will be additive to that, if to the extent that the final map for the House has many new districts, that work will be more intensive and extensive. This is work that, as I've started taking a look at it, some of it can be carried forward, but not all of it will be able to be carried forward, so that when, as we start to approach the November 15 deadline for the boards of civil authority to report back, we will have a very intense period of time to come to a consensus as a board about what we want the final house map to look like, and B, a very challenging time of writing the narrative portion of the final report to cover the items that I just shared with you regarding Addison 1 from the 2011 report. I open the floor to any comments or questions about that, but I think that's just a pretty much where we're going to find ourselves. And just shout out if you're ready to, if you have a comment or a question. Or not. Anyways, that's kind of the way it's going to be. I will try to get a draft together of that, but as you can, I think you can tell, most of that work is going to have to be deferred until we know what the contours of the map are going to be, and to maybe to put a finer point on it, if we get a lot of feedback concerning the conversion to all single member districts, the big question for the board is going to be, do we move off of a single member only plan to respond to those concerns or not? And that all will heavily impact not only what the final map proposal looks like, but this other version of the report, and maybe how much time people will be needing to devote to that during that sort of 2-week sprint.
Tom, thanks for the sample, the excerpts from that include these descriptions. I remember seeing them just when I was at one point reviewing materials from the past and noting how much work went into them. My quick question is, the examples you sent around for Addison and for Chittenden refer to sort of the prior history of the district starting with 1992, and I wondered if maybe this was actually the version that would have been used in 2001, not 2011, because it doesn't have the 2002 in it in its history.
In some cases, it does.
Okay.
And it's we could probably have a good discussion about the extent to which the family history of each town or district is important. I think it ties into one of the other. It may tie into one of the other factors, which is the common interests. You might make a case that a town that's been in more or less the same district for 3 or 4 decades may, by virtue of that alone, have developed common interests with the other towns in that district. I know that people appreciated and put some value on knowing what that history is, because there isn't really any other easy place to go to find it. There is a website on the the Clerk of the Vermont House web page that by town will tell you who the house member from that town was going back to the 1780s, which is kind of a cool thing to look at once in a while. But it also will tell you more recently whether the house member for the town of Charleston lives in Charleston or not. So you get that flavor.
I see, actually, and it's my error. I was reading it, expecting to see it differently, it's not a criticism at all. I realized the information about the 2001 district is embedded because when this document was written, that was the current district. So,
Right.
so for example, for Addison 1, it says what the proposed Addison 1 would be under this plan, and then it says this is the current Addison 3 district. Of course, that's what would have been adopted in 2002. So, okay, that's fine. I got it.
And I think this became part of the 2011 Apportionment Board report because it had been part of the prior Apportionment Board reports, and we carried that on. So that's a heads up about that work. We've covered census errors, responses from boards of civil authority. I think that could take us to here we go. The Senate, our old friend, the Senate map. So we generated a version of a Senate map a few months ago, based almost entirely on the map that the Apportionment Board recommended to the General Assembly in 2011. Mia is in the process of taking that, which is a district builder map, and converting it into maptitude. So we will have the maptitude information in it, and the ability to scroll down to a fine level of detail. I guess I'd like to know who else has been working on a Senate map. Jeremy, in his note this morning, said that he has been, but it's not ready for prime time. So I don't know what his approach or whether he's working on a single member Senate district map or not. Has anyone else been plugging away at something? And if so, what have you been finding? Or
Well, plugging away probably isn't the right description, but I've been looking at the map that we did with the single member districts, and my approach is going to be to make 5 House districts into a single member Senate district. And I've just been looking at some of the ways what we have in the tentative map could fit into that model. But until we get feedback from the BCA, and we might have to adjust what we have, I've been sort of putting that on the back burner as a priority.
so you haven't actually started throwing it down on a map?
No, I haven't put it on a map. I've just been sort of drawing with a Sharpie, counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How does that line up county wise? Does that make,
Right. Okay.
Mr. Little, I've also, obviously broken up Chittenden County into 1 and 2 Senate districts. If you wish, I could talk about that.
We'll defer on that for the time being. Ed, I'll get back to you. The deadline for doing this is the same as the deadline for the final House map, and I know we've been distracted, rightly so, by the deadlines for the House map, getting it to the boards of civil authority. The good news is that we now have our mapping skills at a better level than they're ever going to be again, probably, and can use those in forming draft Senate district maps.
Tom, this is Jeannie.
Go ahead.
So I've been plugging away at it. Is that the phrase we're using? Well, what I've been doing is I took the map that you just referenced earlier. That is the map the lab had proposed 10 years ago, Senate map. That and I took those districts and I just using the using the information we have on county populations and town populations, I wanted to see what the deviations actually are for each of those, because I think when you worked this up a few months ago, you were using the deviations you had were based on our estimates of the census and not the actual final census numbers. So at least I didn't have those final deviations. So I worked on doing that myself, getting the populations for each of those districts. I'm just working in Excel right now. And so I started, so my plan is to start with that just as a kind of starting point and see what I'm looking at. I so far did make adjustments to the districts you had, a couple of the districts that were on that map that were a little out of alignment. I don't have the numbers right in front of me now, and came up with something slightly better in both cases. So that's kind of my approach at the moment, building off of that map, just to kind of see where it takes me.
Good. Well, that's good. I think we're going to have the Maptitude version of that map sometime later this week.
Actually, and it reminds me, just as I definitely don't, I'm not trying to open up the House discussion again, but when you mentioned Maptitude, it reminded me that it would be helpful, and maybe in fact I already have access, but to have access to the to Rob and Jeremy's map in Maptitude, obviously not the version that not a version that we have locked, but a copy, because there are various ways I can use the materials posted to the lab website to look at it in detail, but I find Maptitude would be the easiest for me. So I'd love to find a way to be able to look at the current House proposal that's been sent out to the towns in Maptitude. Not
Chris,
sure.
Chris or Eric or Mia, can you comment on that request?
I think Mia's in the best position to answer that if she's available.
Yes, I am happy to request that the legislative IT grant you access to Jeremy's folder so that you can open up a copy of that read only, or place a copy of it in your folder. I'm not sure which they would prefer to do, but I will submit that request and keep you posted on the progress.
That'd be great. Thank you. I mean, I think that in the end, since there's a good chance we might be wanting to consider modifications to the map based on the replies we get from the boards of civil authority, it would be useful if we could look at it in Maptitude.
And this is Mary. I would also like to have a copy in my folder that I could have access to.
This being the case, perhaps it would be best for me to have a copy placed in a general folder that everyone would have access to and could perhaps use at will. I'll ask legislative IT. I am not in control of the Maptitude server, And so I will ask what they would like to, how they would like to solve this issue for you, and report back with what they intend to do and when it's finished.
Right. Okay,
Great.
thank you.
Thank
Mia.
you.
My pleasure.
Based on our discussions today so far, what is your sense about when we need, what our meeting schedule should look like going forward? I mean, we can continue to meet on Mondays at this time. It strikes me that we may just need to all agree that at the last half of November is going to be a scramble, and that we need to try to be as flexible as we each can in terms of meeting time, and to be as patient as we can with each other, and as kind as we can to our friends at the Secretary of State's office, and as we ask them to help us through that period. We can leave it at that, unless somebody has a different approach.
I think you're right on, Tom. I think it's going to, our meeting schedule is going to be dependent upon how quickly the BCAs get back to us with their input. And as soon as we start getting actionable amounts of comments back, we should start stepping up the pace. But until we get actionable amounts of comments back, we're in a bit of a holding pattern.
Agreed. We have an agenda item that gives Legislative Council, VCGI, and the Secretary of State's a chance, if they wish to give updates or status checks on anything. I think we've heard from, I'm not sure that John Adams is in the meeting today. I will ask him if he can come into it a week from today. However, Amarin or Michael, would you be in a position to give us a recap of what your understanding is of the recourse that a town has if it believes that there's been an error in the census count for a town or part of a town?
This is Amarin. We were preliminarily in touch with the Census Bureau about what this process might look like. It sounds like we will be receiving more information towards the end of November about what period of time states have to submit an appeal if we believe that there was an error in the data. So for the time being, I believe that we are just tracking what we hear from towns, both as part of the process that's occurring at the LAB, as well as any information that's being provided to legislators, or once we are back in session. So we should have some updated information on what that process would look like and the timeline for it within the next month or two.
Cameron and Chair Little, may I just add, Michael Chernick speaking, just to stress the point that the former Representative Chair Little made, that if a town were to go through this process, there is no guarantee that it would have a result in time for reapportionment in 2022. We were involved, if I just may, way back in 2002 of a couple of towns in Windsor and Franklin counties, and those became available by about March. But we were just basically lucky at that point, is the only way to describe it. The census material indicates that there may not be a decision till sometime in 2023.
If that were a variance that was substantial enough, could the General Assembly adjust a boundary, the district boundary in an off year, so to speak?
It's, if you mean would the General Assembly go back, there's been no history of that in the last 56 years since we've gone to the current system. Could it conceivably, hypothetically, but it's never happened.
Yeah. Okay.
At least to the best of my knowledge.
Well, you cover most of that period, Michael. Thank you. Chris, anything else from the Secretary of State's office?
I would just wanted to add that when the board voted on its map a week ago Friday, I just want to thank John Welch in our office, Mia Crow, who's on the line here, and legislative IT and the folks at VCGI for some pretty fast work over the weekend and on Monday to get the map keys built, the individual PDFs extracted, and VCGI put together a really nice map for us that links the PDFs and gives district level detail. And then they added a layer on request to show the census block populations when you zoom down in. So I just wanted to mention that good work by our friends over there at VCGI and Ledge IT, and thank you to our IT staff here at the Secretary of State's office.
Yeah, here. That will make, the record will show that it was kind of a wild few days, that's for sure. In particular when no one is really, it's been 10 years since we had to do it. Is there anybody on the board who has anything else they'd like to bring to the table this morning?
I have a question just about the calendar that you raised a few minutes ago, Tom. Well, you were talking about meetings, but it's sort of in the same ballpark. So I don't think the board, we did come up with a kind of a work plan and schedule for that focused more on the House side because of the additional deadlines and the requirements for time for the boards of civil authority to respond and so forth. But I don't think we ever really pinned down a date that we would like to start discussing actual drafts for the Senate. And as much as I'm reluctant to even think about the amount of work that's going to be needed in the next several weeks and focus on it more closely, I think it's worth noting that after the 15th, which is the deadline that the boards have to respond about the House map, I'm assuming we'll be rather consumed with that work. I mean, obviously some work we can do before then, but certainly after that, November 15th. So it just makes me think we might want to be coming up with a reasonable date by which we would have some Senate proposals close to, Senate drafts close to being done.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have an answer. I'm just saying I think we should probably come up with an answer, soon.
I agree with you, Jeannie, because I'll point out also that after that November 15th date, that's 10 days away from Thanksgiving.
It occurred to me Thanksgiving is tucked in there. Yes, indeed.
Well, we could do this, and perhaps when the map that was worked on this summer is released and circulated and shared in Maptitude, that will inspire us to go further. I guess we could self-impose a deadline of something like, it's scary. The trouble is, Gene, when you look at the calendar, then it gets scarier.
That's why I said it's hard to force myself to do it, because it's worse when you actually know. But
I guess I would say, if anyone has the intention of doing a Senate proposal, a draft map, or if not a map, a proposal that doesn't use a map, but otherwise is by either Excel or written description proposing to change the existing Senate district map, I think you need to get that circulated to the other board members no later than a week from today. Ideally sooner than that. And even if it's at somewhat of a higher and not a granular level, we need to start building a consensus about something. And so if you have an inclination to be working on a map or a proposal for how a map should look, now is the time. And get it circulated in some shape by the end of this coming weekend, so we can talk about it on next Monday. Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay. Thank you, Gene. Any other board members like to chime in with anything before we close out the meeting? Not seeing any signs, nothing in the chat.
Tom, could I ask for some clarification from the board? This is Chris.
Certainly.
Sure, thank you. I wonder how the board would like to be made aware of BCA feedback as we get it. So we're going to get it through this email web form, and we can compile that. We can send it out to you as soon as we receive it. We can send it out every few days. We can save it for your next meeting. I just don't know how. I was wondering how quickly you all would like to see official BCA feedback as it comes.
I think trying to be respectful of your workload. I guess I don't think I need to see it more than once a day or something along those lines. I'm treating that differently from questions, which I think questions need to come through as they are received, so we can facilitate the BCA process moving forward. But if the BCA has met and they're done and they're filing a report, I mean, if there's a place you could stick them on the web page once a day, that would make sense.
Okay.
And if a board member, has a keen interest in learning about something for a particular board, just let Chris know, and we'll try to accommodate that.
Got it. Thank you.
And Chris, if I could just add to Tom's comment, if the way you're going to do it is just to post stuff to the website, if you could just send out an email alerting us that there's been an update.
Yeah, good idea. Yeah.
Doesn't have to be detailed. Just say I've updated the input form or whatever on the website.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Okay, well, seeing no other business, we've scheduled a meeting for next Monday. We're not yet at scheduling them for the fall of the gavel, but we probably will. Thank you. Good work. Thanks to Ledge Council and their greater support team. And be well.
Thank you,
Good to
Tom.
see you all.
You too. Thank you.